Yo, what is going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Thanks for checking into our latest Trade to Black podcast presented by Advisor Shares ETF PSIL. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Big podcast coming up here today. Margaret Brodie, CEO of Rubicon Organics, is going to join us in just a moment. Talk about her recent trip from ICBC and why she believes Canada is years ahead of the European market. She'll explain why. As well, Jim Cacioppo from Jushi joins us once again. Talk about last week's latest print that they announced and really how this 7-7 strategy is progressing and what we can expect as far as next steps with adult use in Pennsylvania. As we got the news, obviously, yesterday regarding that state-run model is dead on arrival, which is great to see. So what can we expect next? Jim will touch on that a little bit. So with that, let's welcome in AV here on a Wednesday. Good to see you, my friend.
How's it going?
Yes, two great guests.
Two great guests, and then we get to round it out with Bronstein with some news from PA.
I just found out, and I didn't give you the heads up before we went live, but Bronstein actually is tied up here today. He's going to join us on Friday morning at 11 a.m. So apologies that anybody was thinking that, but we obviously promoted it. But I just want to give you a heads up right now that he's going to be coming on Friday morning. But we'll talk in depth about Pennsylvania along with Texas. And I really want to ask him, too, as far as like other states when he works on a state level that we are maybe not seeing or hearing about, that we could see some progress being made when it comes to any kind of reform. What are those states? We'll find out and learn out more. But Phoenix, Dave Wave, good to see you. Great to hear from Boris Jordan on your last TDR show. Appreciate it. When is Brady Cobb going to be back on? That is a question for you, Anthony. You talk to him probably almost every day, do you not?
I talk to him weekly. I'll reach out to him and see, but I think he was waiting for some hemp stuff to get clarified in Florida to come back on. I know he's busy with Sunburn. He's been traveling. I think he was in Mexico last week.
Was he? Guap, thanks for the ticker symbol again. Today's TDR Trade to Black podcast is presented by Advisor Shares ETF PSIL, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange. ARCA PSIL is the ticker symbol.
Speaking of, in Canex, which is one of the holdings in PSIL, it was up 720% today on 1.4 billion shares of volume.
What was up with that?
They had readouts on, I think, one of their psilocybin drugs, but the stock is a rocket ship right now. I'm curious to see what it actually does tomorrow.
Wow.
On the open to see if it gets follow through, but it's a psilocybin based drug company, and it's in Canex. It's IXHL.
Oh yeah, very familiar with it. But look, if you don't want to buy one, buy them all through that ETF. PSIL is the ticker symbol. So with that, let's now shift to cannabis. And we've got two great interviews here today with some of the biggest profile and thought leaders and CEOs in the space. We'll kick things off and first welcome in Margaret Brodie back to the podcast, CEO of Rubicon Organics, which trades on the TSX Venture under the ticker symbol ROMJ. Good to see you. How are things?
Fantastic. The sun is shining here in Vancouver and ready to go.
It's that time of year, is it not? We were actually talking. Who were we talking to the other day, Anthony? And we said Vancouver. It is without a doubt probably the best place in North America when it's sunny.
John from Nevis Brands.
That's right.
Yes.
Maybe not always in the rain, but I'm a skier, so and an optimist. Yeah. So when I hear the rain, I just think it's snowing on the mountain.
Yeah. Well, I can handle we get Florida. The rain's going to get crazy here in the next couple of months for the rest of the summer.
Where is your favorite spot to ski when you're in BC?
Whistler. All the time. Yeah, I love it. I mean, look, the mountain's incredible, but the snow is better probably interior, but the mountain, the town is super fun. So
I've never been to Whistler, but educate me here. Is it, there's a lot of tourists that go there, but is it big enough to the point where it's not crowded?
The major weekends are pretty much more crowded than they used to be, but when there's big snow, it's crowded. Yeah. But if you can ski midweek, and even on the big weekends, they tend to black them out for certain passes, so it's not been that bad. And it's it's just beautiful Canadiana, beautiful beautiful mountain views, bluebirds, all the things. Yeah, you just can't go wrong with a day up there.
So should we talk about skiing in this podcast, or should we get into a little cannabis talk? What do you think?
You can put the two of them together pretty well.
Very much so.
I'm not gonna lie.
They go hand in hand quite well.
I'm sure they do.
I'm more of an après. That's my vibe. But look, I would say Canadian cannabis, we think, is going to have incredible few years. And I know you led off talking about ICBC, but boy, have I learned a lot about where the Canadian market is relative to the rest of the world.
So let's go off script and let's talk about that. Maybe dive a little bit deep as to what you mean as to why it seems like the opportunity, as I like to use this term, everything is old is new again. And now we're talking about Canadian LPs, not all of them, but specific ones, and how this could be the most lucrative opportunity when it comes to investing in this space, given the maturity of the actual market itself and what you learned over in ICBC. Do you want to maybe elaborate off of that?
Absolutely. Look, we sent a team to ICBC in Germany, in Berlin, fantastic conference to learn. We called out this year the international market for Rubicon as a test and learn. We're doing fantastically well in Canada. We're very pleased with our brand and our performance here. And we went to understand where's the market, where's the patient. Remember, this isn't a consumer, this is a patient in Europe in terms of the medical markets. And what we're seeing is what we expected to see, but also it reinforced our view. One is, in the long term, this is going to turn into globalized agriculture. With Colombia is really starting to pump out a lot of product. Thailand's turned on, South Africa's turned on. But there are exceptions, but on the whole, it would probably be in the Canadian market in the value space, or product that's being moved into distillate. There are exceptions.
I think you're on mute. Are you on mute?
No. Margaret, your sound cut out.
Margaret, your sound cut out. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Sorry, my phone jumped in onto the speaker. Oh. It upset the computer. It's got a ranking. I guess Apple goes before Microsoft.
Well, point proven, and we'll see you next time, Margaret. Great point.
So what I was saying was that the Canadian market in the early days were on tonnage and on volume, and everybody talked about volume and tonnage. And when we went to Europe, everybody talked about volume and tonnage, and nobody
down
talked
that road
about quality, about genetic, and about brand. We're just seeing the emergence of brands starting to tick right now in Canada and starting to take hold, but it's still early days of that. But the quality story and how the patient is going to move across that experience is huge. And I think in Canada, a lot of people have sat here and thought of this as a consumer. This is a patient in Europe and in these medical markets. Same thing with Australia. And it's going to, in my view, stay a medical market for quite some time.
So how do you approach that then when it comes to, do they value quality right now? Or like you said, it's all volume, but do you approach it?
So I think different markets, each market is different, and each patient and consumer is different. The big observation I would have in Germany is there's a lot of education that needs to happen to get patients the right products for them. And a patient needs consistency of medication. So, I think for somewhere like Rubicon, and I'm not going to tip our hat on our strategy yet, but I think that as we've seen in Canada, people move along that journey in terms of what is going to be able to offer me consistency, what is going to be able to offer me quality, and what's going to do what it says it does.
Yeah.
And right now, we just have, we've had a massive scramble for volume. And we saw that in Canada too in the early days. So what does that mean? I think there are markets that are going to be smart to go into where you can actually deliver that consistent quality. I think the distributors in Germany are going to be that. They're going to be distributors. And if you see distributors across any other industry, their gross margins tend to be more like 8 to 10%, gotcha. Where right now the distributors in Germany are getting 40% gross margin and 20 to 25% EBITDA. But if you think this moves to a distribution model, they're going to look more like 8 to 10% gross margin in the future. So I think there's a long way to go, and we're going to see ebbs and flows of too much supply of poor quality product, not enough supply of good quality product, and the wave is going to continue for a time being. But I think that consumer or that patient is going to come along a journey and learn all the same things that the Canadian consumer learned, which is they want consistency, they want trust, and they want quality. And then genetics going to be into it. We also understood, and please, anybody out there correct me, but I understood that the black market is more expensive than the legal market.
It is.
And that really surprised me.
Yeah. How is the sophistication among the operators that are operating in Europe? If you had conversations with them, are they looking at this opportunity the same as, let's say, you guys are looking at in Canada, or do you think that they're looking very, very medically focused and they're not even worried about adult use or what they need to be looking at in terms of brands yet? in that space?
It's hard for me to comment on that because I didn't meet all of them, and I think people are taking different strategies, and I think time will tell on what the right one is. There are certain distributors that had pre-existing pharma businesses who are just already had relationships with pharmacies and are bolting on these businesses, which is a lot more an efficient way from a cost perspective to do this. But are they focused on the patient, or are they focused on moving volume?
Right.
Versus other groups that are having to build from scratch. So they've got to build their HR, their finance, the admin, all that stuff. I would say there's probably some companies making some of the same mistakes that were made in Canada in the early days, which is spending a lot of money, being high profile, all that stuff. This is about delivering consistency to your patient in the same way that building brand in Canada is about building consistency, building trust, and delivering on a brand promise. So I don't think that the things that we're seeing today are going to be necessarily the successes of 5 years from now. That's exactly what we've seen in Canada. So I feel like the story over there is what can you buy and what's the THC? And the consumer here and also in the US is moving along that journey, right?
Yeah.
Well, when I heard that a few times from numerous people in Europe, that yes, the black market is more expensive than the regulated market, legal market. But then I'm thinking, what's the first question that you ask? What's the quality like? And in due time, how long is that sustainable? And how long is that sustainable, really? Like, do you like that's a question either for either one of you? But do you not?
A long piece of string. I mean, I think it's going to depend on education of consumer and how good a job and how much investment the companies and specifically thinking of Germany can work with the pharmacists to educate. And look, I think some markets are like the UK market seems to be a bit more advanced in terms of that, but I could be wrong. France is going to turn on, they say 26 for a medical project. It could be, I suspect it'll take them a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
Switzerland seems to be moving along quite quickly. Poland is a huge market today.
Doesn't get a lot of attention though, but from what we learn, it's an eye opener from what we've had conversations with a few. Boris Jordan was on one time explaining us about Poland, but completely unaware as to how advanced actually that market is right now. Yeah.
And look, I think we're going to see competition in that value category. So value, mainstream, premium, super premium. Rubicon plays in the premium and super premium categories. I don't see there being significant amounts of contribution of competition to be able to tackle those markets. I just think there's more people in Europe than there are in the US, and there's just not enough. There's not going to be enough supply in those categories in the next few years.
Yeah.
But the value category, I think there's going to be fields of weed that can grow for very cheap. And that market that's going to turn on quickly.
Yeah.
Do you think in a market like Europe, and one of your core competencies is being organic, that in a true medical market, organic matters, or the patients will gravitate, and the doctors themselves will gravitate more towards organic from a prescription standpoint?
I'd like to.
Are we way?
But I want to be real that this is something that I don't think a doctor really wants to prescribe because it's inhaled. So I think we need to be real about that. And organic is a feature, not a benefit. So it's something that we believe, and I think that the consumer in Canada has demonstrated it's about the living soil moving forward to create a more terpene-rich product. I think that's to a quality measure. For us, one of the ways we get that is through organic in our Simply Bare Organic line. But I don't know the answer to that yet. I think a doctor naturally would.
Yeah.
One of the things that there was a story recently done by StratCanna. If you want to follow the Canadian industry, it's a great organization to follow. And they just did a story about organic and that one of the things people don't know is that in British Columbia, you need to be certified organic, and it's actually regulated by the agricultural ministry. We've had phone calls. They check that we've got the certification. They come in. It really means something to be truly organic, which is why you hear a lot of people talking about living soil, because the bar is a lot higher. And we think that matters, but it doesn't matter to everyone, and that's a consumer or patient choice and up to them. I think when you get into the oils and into some of the other products, the German market isn't as open to that because everything needs to be compounded by a pharmacist over there. But I think they'll to me it matters. I like my organic products. I love my Simply Bare. I just saw a chat from someone saying the pink drip is amazing. We are selling out of that right now as it hits shelves. It's very exciting. So I think That's the story of genetics. That's the story of investing in a genetics program. And that's where Canadian companies, I think, are going to see themselves ahead of a lot of places in the world, because we've been working on this for a long time.
Yeah.
And genetics are going to be a big part of the future. There's two parts of genetics. There's genetics that are around, being able to propagate from seed. I know Organogram's doing a lot of work on that. The powdery mildew prevention announcement that came out of Aurora Real, really impressed with those developments. And the focus of our work, we're a smaller company, is about flavor, about a consumer experience. And one of, part of our vision is to elevate the consumer experience and deliver great consumer, and I would say, and patient experiences to people that help them with whether it's symptoms or relaxation or sleep, etc. So there's a long way to go yet on this, and investing in it now, I think is I've said it before and I'll say it again, is where I don't think people are paying attention, but I think in about 3 years it's going to have real value to have those libraries and banks and investment.
So that's where we are with this industry, right? Like, you progressed, told your story. It's quality versus quantity and not volume. And really, in a lot of ways, as we look at the capital trends, especially in the Canadian cannabis market, there's a lot of companies right now that are struggling when it comes to capital. But you are seeing things and opportunities in a different light. And I think in a lot of ways, is it because of what you've just outlined? Because like I see, like, what are exactly your investors seeing in your business model today, I guess, that sets you apart from a lot of the other Canadian players that we've learned along the way here too?
We do what we say we're going to do. I think that's where it starts. Try and not be overly promotional, but be solid and trustworthy. And not everything's going to go right, and that's cannabis. And you're going to have some great competition out there.
Yeah.
But proven teams with track records that can deliver, that are playing where they're competing where they can win. There's capital for that. There's probably not capital for new ideas. When I was in Europe, I was amazed at how many people were raising money. But again, it's a deck with an idea on it. And when you can compare and contrast that to teams with proven background, and frankly, I would say we're on sale right now. We're particularly on sale to a U.S. investor, given where the Canadian dollar is. We were able to go out. We went looking for, and I think a really good rate, $3 million, and we closed on 50% more than that. All growth capital, not looking to pay off debt, but for growth, to drive our business forward more quickly. And once the ball gets rolling on that, it really moves quickly. Very proud to say that every member of our board stepped up. And internally we were 1.5 million, about a third of that raise internally. So really good support. And I think people are looking for, there's been a big trend out of small caps and into ETFs. And I'll be curious to see if that trend moves back to, there's real value opportunities out there, just pure value investors, not cannabis investors, value investors, being companies that have growth opportunities that are real, and then also the opportunity for what's going to happen. I'd be really excited to see the Canadian government put some energy behind cannabis, the competitive advantage for the world.
That almighty question after that election, right? What happens next in this excise tax? Have you had any dialogue, any feedback, any direction? I assume not. As we've all said, like, he's new. Yes, he was prime minister, but it's now officially his new cabinet. I guess they're moving forward, but still early days to figure out what's going to happen next as far as this excise tax. But are you hopeful compared to what's happened in the last 5-7 years?
I'm probably more hopeful than I have been. I think we're more likely to see, there's a big push in Canada for interprovincial trade barriers to come down. And I think there's hope for some streamlining of the excise tax stamp, which actually is just cost to businesses. I think that's probably a lower hanging fruit with the current trend.
That even put in place to begin with when it's federally legalized.
Yeah. Applying a stamp on every single product to each product where it wants to go is you've got to buy the stamp, you've got to record them, all this admin stuff. It's just bureaucracy that's not actually helping the consumer, the business. And I think there'll be movement on that in this trend. And I think the government's already indicated that, very openly, that they're looking at it. Excise tax, I could see there being reform in due course. Who knows? I think right now Canada's, I think, in a good position. I'm curious to see how things go, and I'll be here beating the drum. And welcome to have Mr. Carney, Prime Minister Carney, or any minister or MP come to our site and learn about the industry. because I'd love to see cannabis be like the mining industry, where the Canadian companies go out around the world and have really good positions. I think we could do that based on what I saw in terms of meeting people around the world and the amount of inbounds we're getting. I want us to take this opportunity.
It's good.
With the debt, with you mentioning seeing a lot of decks and people raising money with just ideas, is Germany in that funded capacity phase that we were in? No. Okay.
No, because there's only really 3 operations in Germany that are growing. The cost of electricity there is huge. Portugal has a number of facilities, I believe. Malta does as well. South Africa, but most of it's imported, and I think we're going to continue to see that into Europe. And so I think that's where Canada's got to look about and say, how are we going to compete, and where are we going to compete in this industry? And I think it's got quality and genetics.
Well, the early days, Canada seemed to be at the forefront when it came to global exporting. And in a lot of ways, after it was legalized and we saw the U.S. opportunity, there was a lot of people frustrated that basically Canada fumbled that ball and missed out on the opportunity. Is that a little premature to say and think now, considering where we're at?
I think that the government is going to take notice of this opportunity at some stage. Whether it's this year, might not be. And I think if they don't, we're going to take that opportunity.
Yeah.
Like I'm here to take it. We want to win. I think we have a lot more time in some ways than we think, because I was shocked at how mature our market is relative to where other markets are. And there are obviously individual patients that are there.
How many more years would you say we are in comparison to Germany from what you just experienced and learned?
Minimum 10 years.
Wow.
Maybe even 15, 20. Look, we've been legal in rec for 7 years. Before that, we were almost 20, maybe 15 years of medically legal in Canada. So I think they've just gone medically legal. The consumer, one thing that I heard, and I don't know how true this is that there are real medical patients that are now struggling to get their insurance filled because of the sheer amount of people that are requesting to get insured in Germany now. So, and their default is to actually insurance companies to reject the medical cannabis claims. So again, that was anecdotal, and I always like to call things out that are anecdotal, but I think that really changes the game and the narrative. So there's a long way to go, and it's all still, it's not even at over the counter yet. And so I think that's probably the next step that Germany would go, which is over the counter into more branded packaging. But again, time will tell.
Gotcha. When's the next earnings date? Is scheduled for what date?
It is not announced the date. We did an ERP project. It's taking us a little bit longer. Normally we're about 45 days. We're going to be closer to 60 days after quarter end. But it'll be the last week of the month. Very excited. I'll probably see if I can come on and talk to you guys again about where we're at. And look, I think you'll also see from us in the coming weeks an update on the Hope acquisition. We expect it to close in the second quarter, and more genetics coming from Rubicon.
Yeah,
more product, more genetics, real growth on our core business. And look, this is the moment where a lot of Canadian LPs have moved out of the shelf in Canada into the international market. And we're here to show Canadian consumers that our brands will be consistently on shelf with great quality products to build the brand promise. And we believe the brands of the next 30 years are being built just right now, today.
We always talk about brand recognition right now and how you have to differentiate, especially in price compression in these days right now. But listen, I always love having you on to get educated on the Canadian market and what it presents right now, because I think more and more people, like we've seen some of the stocks in the industry, and there are Canadian companies that are moving right now for good reason. But at the same time, too, you've built a footprint. You've basically picked a lane and owned it. And I think that's probably half the battle when you're trying to succeed in this industry right now, where you focus on one thing and do it well versus spreading yourself too thin. And obviously it's becoming more and more evident, but look forward to seeing your latest numbers relatively soon, and looking forward to having you back on when when those are announced.
Fantastic. Well, thanks guys. And thanks for everything you do. And I would say to everybody, there's an exciting couple of years coming up.
That's good to know. Breath of fresh air. Who would have thought? But here we are, 2025, onwards and upwards. Let's keep in touch. Okay, Margaret?
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Margaret.
All right, thanks. Well, that was interesting as far as what she learned in Germany. But, you and I have brought that up a few times just with regards to the black market being actually more expensive. and the early days are just volume. But, I think in a lot of ways, what we were thinking is actually true. And it's just the maturity of an industry. And you just wonder where that's going to be in a year to 2 years from now. And if, the regulated market becomes more expensive based on, consumers wanting more good quality and patience. But we shall see.
I'd be willing to bet the adult use market will be more in terms of pricing than the black market, not the medical market, especially. I think a lot of it's being subsidized by insurance.
Yeah.
So keeping the cost low. But in the US, I mean, the black market is leaps and bounds cheaper than most regulated product.
She also brought up about doctors have a hard time prescribing something that's smokable. We had a great conversation last week. We're going to have this person on. I forget her name, but we're going to have her on the next couple of weeks. But we learned something interesting last week just about how big pharma views this industry, and more specifically cannabinoids. But correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the times what we're finding is cannabinoids, when it comes to anti-inflammatory and pains and stuff like that, it's almost like it's so much more effective when you're using both antibiotics and cannabinoids at the same time, which was rather interesting, some of the information that we learned. But we're going to talk more in depth on that specific topic the next couple of weeks, and bring our guest on pertaining to that. But interesting scientific stuff that through research that we've learned about the industry that I think a lot of you would get some great takeaways with. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move it along here. It's now time for segment number 2. I know we say, hey, Siri, answer all these questions. Well, we don't need Siri. We've got Jim Cacioppo, CEO of Jushi Holdings. Good to see you, sir. How are things? I think you're on mute. Who's that?
There we go.
Is that your good friend Dre helping you out?
Yeah, it is. I pretended like I did it. You see that?
Like I said off the top, it's numbers crunching time with Jim. We don't need Siri. We need you. How are things? Everything's good? You had a decent print last week. But all in all, it seems like everything's moving along as far as your 7-7 strategy. But things are progressing well. We had Trent on last week. And again, talking about, movements we're seeing in Pennsylvania. Yes, it was beginning some negotiation periods as far as these state-run models, which was dead on arrival, which is obviously welcoming news. But all in all, just wanted to check in and go over some of these numbers. So good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. And hello, AV. Good to see you.
How's it going? Good to see you as well.
So let's dive into some of these numbers. Your last week, revenue came in $63.8 million, down slightly from last year due to price compression in most markets, which I can understand. Gross profits 25.8 with a 40.4% margin. Adjusted EBITDA was $9.8 million, up from Q4, showing improvement in profitability. So what would you say was behind that margin progress, and how sustainable really is it?
Yeah, I would look at the those are actual as opposed to adjusted numbers, but I would say our margin, our revenue number, I'm happy except for the price compression, which we should get to. Ask me generally. I think there's a general question if you look at all numbers of the industry, which we should get to at the end. But in terms of our numbers, I mean, at the end, like the last topic, AV, you remember to bring that up. But in terms of, for us, our revenue growth is affected by that price compression, which I think has to do with some external factors that really are getting sort of out of control. Let's put it that way, across many states, and also our Ohio play and our new dispensaries is the same store sales play, right? We're opening new stores. Virtually, we didn't buy sales at all, so that's just you get them open and then you grow. And our best store that we've opened to date in Ohio was in April, and we opened quite a good one in February, but that one's has to get known. And then the one in Mansfield, which is the strongest store, is in a great spot to get known. More like the throughway, so that opened a little bit stronger, and then the same store sales will continue to happen, and getting full quarter effects, and then so the 7-7 strategy is going great.
So it's progressing well, timeline wise, you would say?
Yeah, I mean, I said 7 by the end of June, and it looks like we'll have 8, at some point in the third quarter. So I say that averages out.
But how's Ohio? I was going to say, how's Ohio progressing? Are you seeing stabilization in pricing as far as products go, and how's that market growing and progressing?
Yeah, so I would say for us, I would point out on our store openings, I think we have 2 of our best stores opening in the 3rd quarter of all of our openings. Not the best. I think there'll be competition between 3 or 4. Our best store is the one we originally had in Cincinnati, but one of them is in Cincinnati, just outside, and another one is in a great spot. So we're very excited about the 2 coming. In terms of the pricing in Ohio, for us, we have a small grower processor. We're vertical. We're getting the vertical profit on a small level. It's about 25% sell through. I think that may tick up and then tick down depending upon store openings, because we have to invest to get it to 50%, and I'm not convinced I should do that. And I like the fact that prices are coming down. So we're in a different position than other people that you've looked at. We were worried when we opened we wouldn't be able to buy third-party product to the extent we are, and we were worried that we wouldn't get third-party bulk. So we've seen third-party bulk, active and coming down, in decent quality, so we can repackage it and get better margin for ourselves. That's kind of what one of our tools in the toolkit. As a retail-first company, more retail-heavy. So we're excited about what's going on price-wise in Ohio. We think it's a pretty good a level, and as it goes down, that'll help grow the market versus the competition, which is really the illegal market.
Yeah. Retail first model. I was reading your branded products now account for 56% of total retail sales. So really, what's working? What's some of the feedback you're receiving, especially when you look at new lines like Flower Foundry?
Yeah, in Virginia, we have the best stuff in the market, right? And it's just a matter of putting more form factors. Things like solventless is something. Solventless gummies, for example, we've been working on. We have a new exciting launch, hopefully coming out that we're not going to speak about, that has a lot of press associated with it in Virginia. We have some more new brands, and we have the Flower Foundry is just putting our best genetics, our newest genetics into that and creating sort of a high-end brand with some excitement around it. And so in Virginia, it's kind of like if you look at Florida, because you guys know Florida much more, it's a big market and you focus on Florida, right? But if you look at, there's a limited selection if you go to any particular store, because they can only sell their own product.
Yeah.
Right? So Truly's had a great strategy of pulling in all these brands from all over, especially California, and repackaging. And in Virginia, we have limited. We have GTI, we have Columbia Care, and we have Verano and us. That's only four as opposed to Pennsylvania, where we have probably 12 active participants of the 18 that have licenses or whatever it is, right? And so the selection is great. We like Beyond Hello to be a place where people come and have good selection. And so one of the ways to create that in Virginia is putting Dre's brand machine, just cranking out brands with some differentiation each time we do it. So it's not just, we're wrapping it differently.
Is that Flower Foundry and the genetics, is that exclusive to Virginia, or is that finding itself into other markets within the portfolio?
The other markets. So we're leading. So we use our Nevada facility because they have small grow rooms. It's kind of an R&D facility, so they tend to have them to make sure they're growing and test them on a small scale. One room is much smaller, and then Pennsylvania and Virginia are the next focus to get them out there.
Okay.
Lots of stuff on the go right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and then I think the other exciting part, going to the numbers of margin, Shad, is we're still not happy with our gross margin, and I think it's good for management teams not to be happy and be honest about this. And we flagged last year some issues with in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, where we're working through that. So we're going to have a fortuitous cycle between the second and quarter and the fourth quarter and the first quarter of next year, where we're growing margins. That's what I believe is going to happen, because I can see what's going on in the grows. The grow is like a 12-week cycle, so seed to sale, so to speak, and so it takes a while to turn that. And we had some very high profile and other management changes, on that side of the business. We're very happy with what we have, and we're fortifying that as we speak.
Gotcha. Did I read this correctly? You launched 391 new SKUs in Q1 alone. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's Dre's brand machine and new genetics. It's new genetics. It's new flavors, for vapes. The customer likes change. Yeah.
So how do you?
That's throughout the whole footprint, right? Because we're changing stuff around. So the customer likes change.
No
kidding. We're constantly looking to offer that, and it's just about getting a machine in place. To get that done, by the way, it's compliance, because you have to get them approved.
Of course.
Right. It's packaging, changing the packaging, and it's formulations, which is on the manufacturing side, whether it's gummies or vapes. It's new products like solventless, and in some of our markets, hydrocarbon is new and solventless is new. And then it's form factors, and then genetics, most importantly, with flower. You got to keep the genetics fresh. We've made huge progress, and we continue to make huge progress. We think the genetic improvement at Jushi is going to be, pretty dramatic throughout the year.
Well, love to see. Go ahead, Anthony. Sorry.
I was going to say, as far as the story goes, Jim, I mean, when people are looking at Jushi, should they be looking at it in terms of when Pennsylvania and Virginia flips, the story goes up in orders of magnitude in terms of growth and in terms of, let's say, the bottom line? As far as those two markets. And are you hearing anything out of Pennsylvania with the bill that's being passed?
Yeah, absolutely. You looked at it the right way. And I think the people who are in Jushi for the long term totally get that. And then the trick is the new people out there is, why would you focus on Jushi, right? Why Jushi versus whatever else you have an opportunity to put money to work, like the MSOS or another MSO. And it really is, we're the most levered to regulatory change in the near term.
Yes.
Pennsylvania, to answer your question, AV, is in process. We expected the state store to get model to get voted down. We thought it would be, we thought it would be dead on arrival. And very importantly, if people go back and look at what the legislators said, the senators said, and what is being said, it's not that they've killed adult use, they've killed that model. They did not like that bill. And the state stores aspect of that bill was, a very visible bad part, but it was bad in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
And so there, we believe there's stuff going on, and you should have Trent on maybe the first week of June for a real update, because the sausage is getting made, and it's not helpful for me to talk about the sausage making, because it's not helpful for the people on the call or the political process. So, because we're deep into the sausage making. So, talk to Trent about having him back. I would suggest the first week of June, and I think it's going to be event-driven and news-driven between now and the end of June. And that doesn't mean it's getting done by the end of June. It just means it's going to be a lot of stuff going on.
Well, Senator Dan Laughlin, he's emphasizing that the governor, Josh Shapiro, needs to get a little bit more involved. And maybe that's not a bad thing either. But like you said, it's moment of truth time. But things seem to be progressing well. And I was happy to see, obviously, the state-run model get rejected rather quickly. Goes to show how important this initiative is right now and how they probably are negotiating and want to get something done. Is that how you're looking at it?
Yeah, there's a budget process going on. And I said this on my call, by the way, too, is that Shapiro has very, good political skills. He knows the players. They know him. He got a budget passed last year with the Republicans in a very politically charged year called the presidential election, where he was up for VP. There was speculation they were trying to embarrass him, right? And quite frankly, I don't know why you wouldn't if you were a Republican, but but he was successful in that environment, getting it through. And so there's a huge gap in the budget, as I've talked about this on, I think I've on your program before, but there's a less than $8 billion reserve fund. I think the people who are fiscally responsible in Pennsylvania, which I think includes the governor, they're only comfortable getting as low as maybe $5-6 billion. I think more like $6 billion. So they don't have a lot of room in the deficit. We'll see how it comes out, but I believe it's going to come out between $2 and $3 billion of deficit this year. This fiscal year ended July 1st, right? July 1st.
What was the number?
The money.
Yeah. Anthony, what was the number Trent said based on adult use passing for Jushi alone on EBITDA? If it's passed, was it? I don't want to say the number.
I don't want to quote him, but I think it was 40 million.
Yeah.
Between VA and PA.
Yeah.
So we don't yet. I mean, Trent gets to talk like that because he doesn't know the numbers, and
correct.
About the CEO who has access to these models and stuff. And it's basically John and myself who sort of like look at this stuff. It's order of magnitude. And we should turn to Virginia, by the way, too. And so process June, get Trent on. It's a big number for us, big number for the market, big number for cannabis because all of the favorite names are big in that state because they think it's a good state, right? And I think it'll be a good program out of the gates, in terms of supply demand for the customers because there's grows that can get turned on and we can expand. We are expanding and the 200 stores is a good number to get started. It's not 100. It's not like Illinois. Remember, was 50, 55, right? So it's a big number. It will be a big increment to the market. So I think it'll be a great program. And then
with the marketing,
we should
I was going to say, with the marketing and brand expertise that Jushi has internally, have you evaluated or have you looked at any sort of, let's say, naturally derived hemp products and joining some of your peers in those verticals, or staying completely clean to the state-run cannabis model and kind of like sticking to your core competencies?
Sticking to the core competencies. To me, that's a separate business that's going to generate negative free cash flow. So, there are companies that have that luxury. I think if you were very concentrated in Florida and that's a good strategy for you potentially in Florida, as a way to learn about it. If you're unlevered, and you want to, have a growth, maybe that's a good strategy. I'm, as an investor, I'm not putting any value on that for any of these companies. I'm in a bunch of them, One East hedge fund. And so, I don't put much value on that. And I think it's honestly, I think the whole thing could go away. I think there could be a farm bill that shuts down the hemp thing because it's being arbitraged. And the worst part about it is the illegal market. The illegal market is arbitraging these smoke shops with hemp, to sell products that, if you guys been talking about this new term that's out there called inversion. The inversion for your audience is when product is taken from, let's say, California or Washington State and sold legally through cannabis stores, right? Mm-hmm. So that's happening, but it's also, they sell that product, with California stamps on it through the hemp stores or the smoke shop. And so that's a huge problem. I think that's under recognized, and under talked about. And it kind of funny. I was thinking the other day, like there's a big company out there that's a lot of the big companies are doing, but one in particular that was early, and it's a good way to get this killed is for these big MSOs to go after it, and then it turns into a company because they're doing the arbitrage, right? They're doing the arbitrage, right? And it's not supposed to be. I mean, those distribution outlets are doing illegal things. Mm-hmm. One of our secret shoppers went to a store. Curaleaf just went, changed their hemp store on Clematis Avenue in West Palm Beach, right? That's I think AV, you're from Florida. I don't know if you know this, but it's kind of happening avenue, like
very much so. I know the area well.
Yeah. And so they did that, and by the way, it looked very dead to our secret shopper, but it's early, so you would expect that. Mm-hmm. And so, but down the street there was a gelato store. Okay. Our secret shopper went into the gelato store. Okay. So, and guess what they sell? Gelato and hemp.
Yeah, they sell THC flower.
Yes, and there's THC flower in there. So you have a store serving, ice cream. And,
are they marketing this?
Dude, there's one on Las Olas as well in Fort Lauderdale. There's a gelato coffee shop, and then there's a THCA shop. You guys built right in.
Press on this. I mean, there's a farm bill out there. You should be a spokesman. It is a huge problem. So here's another example.
Stop by there tomorrow, Anthony, when you're filming.
Yeah.
Our most important state is Pennsylvania, Virginia, two most important states. So in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, which is close, by the way, to the capital, Harrisburg. So one of our people decided, hey, we should get some press around this in a closed jurisdiction. And he said, pick some stores, some smoke shops, and we'll secret shop them for you and get it tested, right? And so you pick them. And so they pick a couple stores, and they go in and they prove it to them with tested results. Like, this is THC, this is what they're selling there, right?
Yeah.
The mayor of Lancaster closed down these stores and found $465,000 of cash, right? So it was obviously a big
Sounds
business,
about
right?
Yeah.
And so like how the fuck is this happening, getting no press? I mean, like, what the fuck? Like, how is this happening? And politicians don't talk about it. I mean, they're normalizing this.
I think they're getting part of the proceeds. If I had to guess, I mean, look in Florida, Ron DeSantis is supporting the hemp companies. Ron DeSantis took donations from the hemp companies to fight Amendment 3. Ron, I mean, the medical card, the medical card issuers in the state of Florida were telling patients, do not vote yes on 3 because it was going to impede their business. And then they're all in cahoots with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
so the best remedy for this, AV, is shining the light in a big way. And we're going to make some movements doing that. And litigation, shining the light litigation. I mean, and like if Trump, proves something with Doge and it's shining the light is very powerful. So the light needs to be shined. And in one of these big MSOs, you're putting these hemp shops, maybe that's a way to attract attention. Big companies are doing this now. Oh my God, this is getting out of control. I don't know if that's like the downside of their strategy, but I got a store that used to lose money as a THC store. I turned it into a hemp store. It loses even more money because you still have the same lease. But I'm like making a point. That to me seems like a really good strategy for a large company. You're losing money anyway, so you lose a little bit more money, and so like, I think the stuff is whether they intend it that way or not, it's great, And by the way, just switching gears, Virginia. You want to hear about Virginia? Then I want to get to the Scrooge of the illegal market, as a wrap up, and my take on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So Virginia has an election this year. The Democrat is a great candidate, raising a ton of money, right? Republicans not raising a lot of money.
Okay.
And the Democrat was a consensus great candidate, U.S. House Representative. Her name is Abigail Spanberger, right?
Correct.
She's ahead by 15 points in the last poll.
Yep.
And you're in an off year with a Republican president, so it's a bad year. Democrats typically win 2 times after Republican serves in a row for governor. So like it's all set up for the Democrats to win. So like, and we passed the bill. We got to, the Virginia legislators have passed a bill, got it on the governor's desk 2 years in a row that the industry supported. So, to me, this is like, I'll be shocked if she loses. I'll say that, like, I'll be shocked if she loses at this point. And we're far away. We're far away. Sometimes you see a layup and you turn it into a dunk because, you can do that. And you can make it really beautiful because you have so much time and there's nobody behind you to block it, right? You've seen that.
That election's what, in November, correct?
Yeah, it's in November. Yeah, 2025 this year. So and the legislative session
this year,
the legislative session, the pre-work starts after that, November, December pre-work, and boom, they go in January and they get everything kind of done and on her desk. Hopefully, they're both women. So on the desk of the governor, at the end of March, and then business gets signed or not signed or vetoed in April. So I think this is going to be the year in Virginia. I don't know. We'll be next year in 26. I don't know that we'll be able to sell it, but like if I was investing in stocks, I would think that would be a very significant, because stocks are supposed to anticipate future cash flows, not past cash flow. Last time I checked. And
Tuesday, November 4th, 2025 is the night of the election.
Your birthday. There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Falls on election day every once in a while.
Yeah. So we're super excited. But by the way, I just want to bring this up. We also have investment projects. We own like almost 9 acres of land behind our. It's attached. It's all in the license. It was very expensive. It's in data center land, right? And we paid $21 million in cash off our balance sheet for that, right? There's no lease. We're not polluted with these leases, right? Which people forget, because, we happened to be late. We bought one in a distressed situation, which is our Pennsylvania asset. We're not drawing down on the lease anymore and stopped doing that 3-4 years ago. So it's relatively small amount to the size of the company. And it's not a terrible lease. We got the rates down when we did draw on it to closer to 11%, on the draws. And we got the escalators down. But if you look at it, we have expansion capabilities in Virginia that are quite significant, and that'll be a great investment opportunity. And oh, by the way, we have that in Pennsylvania too, right? So if our sales at retail are going to double or more, I want to stay at that 50%. I'll need to add warehouse, right? So we have that capability with our land as it exists in both those sites. So what I need is a cheaper cost of capital to get going on that.
We need more markets to go online. That's for sure. And that's why we feel Pennsylvania is the next step, and not far behind it is Virginia, which is carrying a lot of attention for your story specifically. I want to talk about, before I let you go, what'd you think of Terry Cole announcing, if he is indeed confirmed as head of the DEA, that one of his first priorities will be reviewing the rescheduling of cannabis? What was your thoughts?
I think we went from some low, lottery kind of bet, not any knowledge, to more like a 50-50 bet. You go to the craps table and you're going to play the very conservative strategy there, and you might be able to win. So I think it's a 50-50 bet whether it goes through that process. But I think there's other ways for that to get done too. So we'll see. And the big guys are very focused on that. They have a committee almost solely focused to that. That's some people's sole focus of some large MSOs and some of their groups. So, I'm kind of staying out of that one. There's other things going on, in Washington. And by the way, we should talk quickly about the illegal market. Is that cool? Are you?
Yeah.
I do want to get on the soapbox. I think the leaders of the industry aren't talking about this enough, but I may be wrong. I didn't have a chance to do a deep dive in their conference calls yet. That just all happened. But if you look at the quarter, I thought it was, Trulieve, with the Florida business, was able to, but I thought generally you saw sales that was kind of, worse than expected across the board.
I thought they were.
Yeah.
Especially for Trulieve.
But their margins,
adding 30, the margins were great, but they added 30 stores in the year and their revenue was flat.
Yeah. But as somebody running in the business, I'm like, okay, I like their problems. I mean?
Yeah, that's good problems.
They keep, their cost of the grow has got to be great, like that Jefferson City, whatever they call it, right? It's got to be great. Yeah. And so, but if you look across the industry, disappointing, and it's the illegal market, right? And it's the illegal market. And so it's this, so New York, you should, talk to people, what they're doing, this inversion product that's coming through dispensaries. They did some busts. And so, that's a good, that's a big state to do it. And so other states need to, Oklahoma did some things. I'm not as familiar with that, but the issue is in California, they have nowhere to go, right, with their product. California is not growing. The taxes, are high. The illegal market thrives, right? And so what's happening is the whether it's a legal grow, and I would suspect large, and I know this because we did diligence some large growers. They have these burner distros, like two guys on the phone, and they're going and they're getting their product tested, and they're making their way into the smoke shops, right? And then you have the inverted product, which is even more devious. And if you look at Nevada, we called around some of the larger players, like, you guys got to focus on this, and it's a shit show in Nevada, to be honest with you, a shit show. I mean, there's smoke shops everywhere, and then you have this, and Nevada needs to be called out. The law enforcement, the Cannabis Control Commission. I mean, they're doing a shit job. I mean, just total shit. It's a shit.
I mean, New York just had to pull product from shelves because there was legal product from California.
That's the inverted product. Yes,
correct. On a legal dispensary shelf in New York City.
That separates inverted product, right? It's because it's actually stamped from that state, right? Which is going on in Nevada for sure, right? So that separates that, which is like wildly illegal, right?
Yeah.
to like, everyday garden illegal, which is getting your product through burners distros and the state of California. So I actually thought of something before this podcast. I just remembered. I think Governor, what's his name? The California guy, Gavin Newsom. Yeah, Gavin Newsom. Yeah, I think he ought to have somebody on. Maybe me. I'd volunteer. If I don't have to go to Sacramento, because I don't want to do that. I like going to LA. If they'll meet me in LA for a podcast, I do that. But I'm not going to Sacramento.
Not a bad strategy.
On my hands. But I would do it virtually. That would be my thing. But like, he's doing a podcast. Let's talk about this. Like, how the fuck is your state's product everywhere? Like, how are you going to be president of the United States? So you're going to run against a law and order guy who's DEA in Pennsylvania.
Good point, right? Jim.
Or the Kentucky guy, who they love, the governor. I think the governor of Kentucky, one of those states, is a Democrat. They love him in the Democratic Party. Or the Michigan woman, right? You're going to run against them, right? And you're going to have this shit going on in your state. Just shut down the podcast. You're a lame duck anyway. Move on. You're not doing that. Go on CNN, go on MSNBC talk show and make few million. Maybe you're a 10 million a year guy as a host, but like, you're not going to be president of the United States with this issue. So like, somebody's got to call this out. Those burner distros. And if you look at, some of the,
you need to go on.
So some of you, they're California based. How are they growing? Like, California's not growing. How are they growing? How does that work? Is that magic?
The math doesn't math.
It's California magic. So it makes no sense. And then the private companies, the ones you don't know about, I mean, come on. You know about them. In fact, one of those companies, those private companies, their brand, if you poll, minors, it's the one they know about.
Yep.
It is. They have the most brand value of anybody, right? The illegal, like, national players have the most brand value by far. It's not GTI's products. It's not Curaleaf's products. It's not Select. It's those products with the illegal and the young consumers. That's what it is, because they graduate. So like, I can't believe, like, people have to start calling this out. We need spokespeople who are actually intelligent and can hold a good argument about this. It's really awful. And I think, they're getting shut out of, them getting shut out of New York, right? When New York went and did the right thing, not just inverted thing recently, that helps, but what they did to shut down all legal dispensaries, they needed to go everywhere to fill that gap, because that's $1 billion market. Yeah.
Grinding Gears with Jim, presented by Jushi Holdings here on a Wednesday. But honestly, this is all good information, and we're getting a lot of great feedback from a lot of our viewers right now based on some of the stuff, but it's speaking facts. But
and by the way, this reminds me, I want to put an exclamation point on this for the federal politicians, right? And I know the show's ending, but like, I grew up in Miami in the 70s into the 80s, right? And what was prevalent back then? Have you ever watched Narcos or read Don, book about Don Pablo? But I forgot what it's called. It's a really great book. But it all came through Miami. Everything came through Miami. President Reagan, Just Say No, Nancy, they shut it down.
Yeah.
Okay. What happened? It went everywhere else. It went to New York. It went to Texas. It went to, through Mexico to California direct. So that's what's going on. It's like whack-a-mole. They have to shut down the source of it. They have to just they have to go after these companies, and it's federal. They're breaking federal law, by going across. It's a federal thing. So that's what needs to go on, and they need to just, the legal industry has to take over, or else these guys, are going to keep owning it and not pay taxes. That's
where we are. Yeah. That's where we are today. It's in some ways a generational thing, and a lot of the policymakers are still living definitely in that just say no era. Yeah. But when you stop up and look, that's 40 years ago, 40 plus years ago. And a lot of time has changed. And now, what's the latest stat? 70% of Americans support legalization of cannabis. Is that correct? Something like that, around that number.
Is that right? It's something
higher.
That.
I think it's somewhere between like 74 and 76.
Yeah.
I think it's like of seniors, it's like over 55% of seniors.
Yeah.
Jim,
and then medical, by the way, if you add medical, supporting medical or adult use, it's like
that's high 80s,
that's almost
90s
or something.
Yeah. Will we see you next month in Chicago at Benzinga?
No, I'm busy, but Trent will be out there, and honestly, I would rather be with him if I were anybody because he's so plugged in, and he's going to probably say more than I would because I don't have confidence to talk about the regulatory stuff. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say or not. The sausage making is so complex, I can't get into that.
Smart.
So, I mean, he knows what to say. I'm not saying he doesn't know what to say, but I know that I don't. I'm not comfortable talking about something that I could be like hurting our process. So I'm staying away from that.
Good stuff. Stray there with you. Tell him I say hi.
I will. I will. Yeah. There's the German. Yeah.
For all brand strategy with Dre. But for anyone that doesn't know who Andreas is, last I remembered, I think Dre, you won an Emmy for photography.
Grammy Award.
Sorry.
Grammy Award. Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, I want to do a plug. Dre's movie is called American Valhalla. And he directed this movie, and it's about Iggy Pop, and it's a must see. I own it. It's great, and it goes back. You can get it. You can buy it on Prime.
So we're going out to LA in the summertime. We need to set up a podcast where we're on location with Dre, Iggy Pop, and really understand the culture behind it all, and talk a little bit about the history of it. I think that'd be a great setup, and I think our viewers would like that. Gentlemen,
cool. Hey, try to get Gavin on Gavin Newsom's podcast. UNAV. I think that's a good one.
Matt Gates, I'd like to get too.
Yeah, cool.
But I understand, but you know what? He understands the cannabis story very, very well. And like him or hate him, he's got an audience right now with his new podcast. So that's only going upwards. Anyway, Jim, always appreciate you checking in, and let's keep in touch. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Good job, guys. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jim.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Brilliant mind. Economics, Harvard grad. You can understand, obviously, the wealth of knowledge. Michael Thompson, good friend of yours. Love how Anthony keeps it real. Calling out underperformance and no fluff, even if the CEOs can't handle the truth. Major MSO. Michael, appreciate, obviously, the donation towards the channel. You've done that 2 days in a row now. So appreciate it as we try to keep the lights on. But all in all, it's a jam-packed another podcast of great information. We talked about companies, but at the same time, too, we also want to talk about reform stuff, industry trends, which I think that we more than did. And what was your key takeaways from today?
VA and PA are going to be big. And I think people need to start re-looking at the Canadian LPs more seriously than they were. I know. Very good points. Yeah. Speaking of Canadian LPs, I was reading actually today, and you don't have to provide any feedback, but there was a class action lawsuit with the FRIA, aka Tilray, based on some controversial acquisitions dating way back of Nuvera and Latin Holdings. So as it stands now, is what I read, $8.5 million will be covered by insurance and former executives. And you can probably put two and two together as to what some of those former executive names were. But Irwin Simon was actually publicly saying this will not affect share price. So interesting story that was brought up and was actually settled. But I remember that Nuvera time. But anyway, I'm sure some of you people got a chance to review that online. And if you haven't done so, make sure to check it out online. Maybe you can put the link in the comment section, guap, if you get a chance. In the meantime, Michael Bronstein, that was going to come on here today, is going to join us Friday morning, 11 a.m. We'll talk about all the stuff related to Pennsylvania, as well as some medical movements down in Texas, among other things. So PA and Texas will be at the forefront. And do we know how Village Farms performed today? It was doing rather well midday. I think finished today up 4%.
Was it 4?
Something like that.
Good little week for VFF. Trades on the NASDAQ.
I finished today up 4%, dollar flat.
There you go.
And the Panthers will beat the pants off of the Maple Leafs tonight in Toronto.
You think? Beat the pants off of them?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I disagree. I think the Leafs are winning tonight, but I could be wrong. Mark it.
I think you're wrong.
Book it. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are beating the Florida Panthers tonight. We'll talk about it on Friday and find out who's right, who's wrong. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thanks for checking in, and we'll see you back here Friday morning, 11 a.m. Thanks, everyone.
See you, buddy.
Well, I liked that one, didn't you? Let us know by leaving your comments below and stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. We appreciate you logging on here today and learning more information about where this industry is headed. If you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And keep the conversation going by leaving some comments below. We always love to get your feedback. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for watching our latest Trade to Black podcast.